Black Mirror, Season 1, Episode 3, The Entire History of You. Yes, we're back for another Black Mirror review. We're going through every single episode in Black Mirror, so make sure you drop a sub if you want to see my reviews for future episodes. Please leave a comment down below of what you thought of this episode, as well as staying to the end to see what I rated it out of 10. Spoiler warning ahead. We start this episode being introduced to Liam, who is in a meeting with the higher-ups of his company. He's a lawyer, and he's been given a very, fake nice comment at the end of the interview where it feels like he's probably going to get fired. He leaves the interview and we see him in a taxi on the way to the airport where he starts reviewing that moment back on a screen. And he's able to do that with the technology in this episode where there's a little implant on the back of your ear and you're able to re-watch your memories. And I was... incredible. We'll get to that very shortly. But as a story, he goes to the airport, he goes through security. To get through security, you've got to show the security guard your last day, 24 hours of your memory, which is very invasive, but he's completely fine with it. He flies over, he goes to a dinner party where his wife is there with a bunch of old friends of hers. He oversees her talking to somebody called Jonas, who's an old friend, but also turns out to be an old fling of hers, who we later find out throughout the episode as it develops was more than just an old fling, but was actually a long-lasting partner, to the extreme where she actually cheated on Liam with Jonas. And that's obviously found out because Liam throughout this episode is interrogating his wife, played by Jodie Whittaker. He's reviewing memories, he's divulging and dissecting every little moment to find out that something's not right. And I thought it was really interesting how, the use of this technology was used throughout this episode to progress the story. Liam's obviously very, very engulfed in this case that he's built in his head. And as he's a lawyer that's probably going to lose his job, I thought that was really interesting that he chose to take this case on. She's like a witness on the stand as he's talking to her, but he also goes to the extreme, obviously being very drunk as well, driving straight over to Jonas's house to interrogate him and put him under the spotlight, getting very aggressive, asking him to delete all of his memories of his wife, which is actually just mental to think about. That's so drastic and so extreme to, hey, you, delete everything you ever thought about this person, gone forever. Like that, just disappeared. Oof, horrific. But he finds out, of course, that on a certain day when she said they were no longer seeing each other, they were pictured in his bedroom, in his bed. And it turns out that she was cheating on him for a longer period of time, and to the extreme that his kid was never even his. Absolutely horrific. And we find out he's obviously kicked her out of his life, and he goes to the extreme at the very end of the episode to cutting out the technology in the back of his ear and literally removing every single memory he has of her, which is really, really extreme. And I think kind of takes on that idea that what you would do in that scenario, you'd want to remove every memory, but he physically can, and he does. But in the same process, he removes everything else in his memory as well, which is quite harrowing. Moving over to the concept. Of course, the concept is all about that technology in the back of his ear that all the people have apart from one or two, and it's unreal. It's an unreal piece of technology. I want it right now. I'd want it right now. As soon as I watched it back in the day, I remembered it when I was rewatching it. I want it. However, this episode explores why having it would be terrible, would absolutely be horrific, especially for people that overthink and get in their own head. That's me. So even though I'd love to review my memories, look back on things, this, that, and the other, that tool would end up being used negatively by certain people. And I am one of those certain people. I can be very honest about myself. I know I would be doing very similar things to Liam in places, looking into certain conversations, being like, what did you say there? Well, did I read that correctly? Oh, have I got the wrong impression about that person? Let me watch back that video. It's bad, but so many of us would. And I think that's what this episode and the concept of it is I think this is a technology that a lot of us would love to have, to be able to rewatch as a video on a screen our memories. As I've said in previous videos, I actually record a 1 second a day and I have done since 2020. It's my somewhat form of doing this. Do you know what I mean? But it's a negative in the long scheme of things, because you would just nitpick certain scenarios. You would get into arguments over different things. Of, you said this, no, you said that. All right, let's watch it. 20th of May 2012, you said this, mate. I've got it right there. Do you know what I mean? Like, we don't need to do that as a human race. We don't need to. But we would start doing that because of the ability to with this tool. And it's explored very much through this episode, through Liam being very, very... he's just engulfed in this case that he's built in his head, that he has to keep going into the bitter end, even if it means drunk driving to his house, to Jonas's house, to confront him and physically threaten him to delete all the memories of someone. Do you know what I mean? The concept is brilliant. And I think when I first watched it, I think this again highlights what Black Mirror is. Of course, it's the 3rd episode of season 1, so we've kind of got the gist of what it is, but as a concept, as a technology, as things like that, you could have easily had a beautiful episode here. You could have easily, you know, maybe explored Alzheimer's or dementia and how memories are fading, but you could have a tool that could help. You know what I mean? You could easily have done something like that. But instead, you've taken this technology and used it in this way. You know, instead of being beautiful and reliving fond memories of someone that you may have lost, you know, it was really dissecting and calling out and quite aggressively interrogating people about certain things they said back in the day and certain things they did in their memories, as well as even just like dirty and disgusting of, you know, you would use those old memories of quite exciting times to pleasure yourself. Do you know what I mean? All of those different things were explored. He could have easily done beautiful things and like lovely things and a lovely message, but this was like another realization that Black Mirror don't mess about. It don't do those sort of stories, at least at this moment in time. And yeah, this is the realm it went for, because that's what us as humans, we would do. We would. And I can put my hands up and be honest in that sense. I literally want this technology, but I know down the line I'd end up probably using it in ways that are explored in this episode, because we're just human beings. We're not supposed to have that power. We are not supposed to have that power and that ability. You know, memories are supposed to fade and be brought back in natural ways. And, you know, you're not supposed to dissect every moment. And for someone as me, as a massive overthinker, I would. Shamefully, I would. So, yeah, I just thought the concept as well. I thought the concept being introduced to me again, as I've watched it before, but watching it this time, made me go like, yeah, man, I love that technology. And then realizing, oh, wait. Would I? You know, that's really, really cool. Moving over to the characters in this episode, and I want to talk about Liam. He's an interesting character because I think it's not too dissimilar to some characters later down the line in Black Mirror where you feel for them, but you also can highlight they're a bit of a schmuck. Like, the way that he's going about this is objectively very negative and aggressive, confrontational, and, you know, all these things. But at the same time, what he had the itch for and what he was feeling and suspicious of was true, and because he delved into the case and he found it, you know, it was true, but at what cost? You know, he looked in and delved into this story to find out that it was true, and then he lost everything in his life. So I don't know if I felt bad for him, but also he was the one exploring it. I don't know. I also feel as a whole, and you can let me know if you agree with this in the comments down below. I do hope you guys are watching these episodes at a similar time to me, so it's fresh in your memory as well. Oh, freaking memory. You can't just rewatch them like this. Sorry, let me get to the point. I think these characters are quite generic and quite bland. Okay, and you might think I'm wrong in saying that, but let me get my point. I think they've done that for a reason. You know, that friendship group, you know, I can't name you any of their names. I don't think they're any identifiable. I think the wife, Jodie Whittaker's character, it's like she's not really anything to sing home about. Like, she's quite mundane. You know, she just says, I didn't do that. She doesn't really have a moment in the episode where I'm like, great little scene from you. Like, I don't think these characters can even tie the shoelaces of some later down the line characters that we explore in some Black Mirror episodes. But I think that was done intentionally. I think it's supposed to be very generic and mundane characters so that we could apply people that we know in our real lives to those characters. Like, we all know a friend of a friend who's a bit of a know-it-all. We all have mates in a group like that. You may have a partner who obviously has previous relationships and things like that in their life. And I think this episode is supposed to just be like, here's a template of characters and people that we all know in our lives. And here's a technology that a lot of people in their life want. You know, and here's characters that, you know, are very generic and you can apply to your real day and real life friends and family and what have you. Let's see how it would play out. This is how it would play out. Do you really want it? I think it is actually like a little mirror being reflected back to us. A black mirror. No, it's been reflected back on us being like, do you really want this technology? Because you have a mate like that and you have a partner like this and you have this, that and the other. You know, do you really want to be delving into those memories? I think it is that, and I think that's why they made these characters maybe not as, you know, extreme and extravagant as later down the line characters, because it doesn't need it in the story. I think the concept and the way the story develops is supposed to just highlight to us that this technology, we don't want that. moving over finally to the twist. And I think the twist, of course, is very hard-hitting in the sense of, you know, he loses everything in his life. He loses his wife, he loses his child, who wasn't even his child. You know, it doesn't get much darker than that, really, in a very grounded story. You know, he loses his family, but it was his doing. And I think that's also very interesting as well. I think what you can see, just like from the mise-en-scène in that final room, you know, the painting that he hated, the colors of the room, this, that, and the other, the colors of the house, you know, with her there and pre the incident, you know, it has life to it, it has color. And then later down the line, it's grainy and it's got loads of whites and it's just very like lifeless in that. And I think that was supposed to be telling as well. Like, you know, this was his doing. He loses his life. In some sense, he loses everything that he knew and loved in his life. We can assume he's lost his job as well. So yeah, I think it's quite hard hitting in that sense. Again, not hard hitting like other later down the line episodes. Ow. But I think it's supposed to be like, yeah, you want, you know, who wouldn't want this technology? Like, I definitely did want it. But then you watch this and you're like, nah, I wouldn't want it. And it's like this idea that, you know, he lost everything in his life that he knew and loved. Was it worth it? You know, or actually is it a twist where it's like, he did find out the truth, like his itch was accurate, like she was cheating on him, his kid wasn't his kid. So did the technology being used actually help him find out the truth of the matter? He won the case. He won in his lawyer, you know, realm. He won the case, but he lost his life at the same time. And it went to the extreme of he lost even everything else by him taking out all of his memories at the same time, because he couldn't live with knowing that she wasn't there anymore, you know, knowing that it was all a lie. I don't know. Is ignorance bliss? Is that what's being explored this episode? I think that might be the twist as well. He could have lived his whole life not knowing that and lived a happy life. It would have been a lie, but is ignorance bliss? I don't know. You let me know in the comments down below. I think this one opens up a lot of conversation. I think about, you know, technically the technology was good. It helped him find the truth of a scenario that told him his life was a lie. Thumbs up, you know. But in that same breath, he loses everything and his life is miserable because he found out it was all a lie. But then ignorance is bliss. Yeah, you know, it's hard. It is hard. It is hard one to pin down and accurately say. But I think overall, I think it is a negative, isn't it? He loses. I don't know. Do you think it's a negative ending? It's very dark. Him pulling out as well, losing everything, all of his memories. He couldn't live with any memory of her because in his house was just all the things reminded him of her. But is it a good use of technology? Or was the technology bad for him and his family? I don't know. Please help me in the comments. Let me know. So my ranking out of 10, which you've been waiting for, and where does it land on the table, on the leaderboard? I can reveal it's a 7.5 out of 10 for me. And it could have been a bit more. It could have. I just think there's certain elements to it that maybe like the characters weren't really like, oof, I really enjoy those characters and things like that. You know what? It could be an 8, but I'm going to stick with 7.5. Because when I write it down initially, there's a reason I put 7.5. Talking about it more now, I could maybe push it to 8, but I'm going to say 7.5. Let me know what you gave out of 10 in the comments down below and where you would put it on your list. We're building that list one by one, and we're going to be continuing to add to it throughout the next few weeks as we go through every single episode of Black Mirror. If you like the sound of that, make sure you drop a sub. I'd really appreciate it. Of course, we'll be back for the first episode of season 2. Be right back tomorrow. So thank you for coming through. If you're not subbed, please do come through to the Twitch stream. The link's in the bio, and of course the Discord as well. Continue the conversation in the comments as well as in the Discord. There's a bunch of people in my community that would love to get involved and talk to you about your thoughts on the matter as well. Thank you for coming through. I've been Floppyleggs, and I'll see you when I see you.